Hello guys, and welcome to The Bright Agent. Today I'm going to be focusing on how to write a detailed paragraph in English literature. Not language, because the format that you have to do is different, and there's also creative writing, which you obviously won't do to point evidence, explain or whatever, because there's no quote in the 40 marker. And essentially speaking, all those structures are different, but like the small amount questions will require that. So this video is very, very important for all years. So the paragraph structure is through 5 letters, so it's a Peter paragraph. The P, first of all, stands for point, and all you have to do is just write your point out. For example, if you were to say that Macbeth is a traitor, you write, Macbeth is a traitor later on in the play. That's essentially your point. You can develop it on a little more, but don't spend too much time on it, since that does waste time. And English is those a subject which relies on you writing quickly and still writing in a detailed manner. So don't rush it. Don't take too much time. Just be in a middle ground between those two. Actually thinking of crafting a point, as well as being slightly quick about it, since time doesn't wait for anyone. Now, evidence is the main thing which gives your paragraph substance. That's the thing which gives it substance. Well, evidence you can't explain. And without explanation, you can't really give anything else. You can't even give the technique or the reader or whatever. So, evidence is essentially what you're presenting. If you're a lawyer trying to defend a defendant, then you will need evidence to support your thinking or your opinion. Because a lawyer can't just go in a court and then just say random things without anything to back up. In the same way, for paragraphs in English literature, you will need to bring the best evidence possible and try to talk as much as you can about it. So that way, the examiner really knows what you're talking about and knows that you're talking in some depth. Now, technique is T. Technique gets less necessary, but if you name it, then it still has some importance. It's not the most valuable part of Peter paragraphs, but it still is important anyway, since it means that the examiner really knows what terminology you're using for a particular piece of evidence, and then you can explain that on later. For example, you could say, the sentence length in this text is shorter, meaning that the author wants the readers to feel more hurried, or whatever. I know that blends into a bit of reader, but yeah, you can still do technique. Technique is literally only half a sentence, or a small part of a sentence, so it's not as massive as the other ones. Still important though. Try and learn it. Now, explain. Explain is really important. Arguably almost as important as your evidence. Because if you just give a piece of evidence without explaining it, that means that means the examiner will think that you don't understand text, even if you have complete understanding. So it's important to explain your point, so that way you can get your point across to the examiner or whoever's reading it, and therefore separates you into that top band. So explanation will usually be at least 3 or 4 sentences. However, don't just try and waffle for too long, since waffling just makes your point go off on a tangent. You talk about something and then you completely forget about it. and that can be helped with a bonus thing that I have at the end of the video. So essentially, explanation is just trying to interpret your evidence, essentially. Now, reader or relevance. Yeah, you can combine those two together. You don't only have to do reader and you don't only have to do relevance. It's better if you do the two together. So, this last part for reader or relevance is also important because it shows the message that the poet or author or whatever is trying to spread to the audience. For example, Dickens is trying to spread the message that Scrooge becomes a better person or more compassionate or kind or charitable, whatever, at the end of the play, to show that all people can have a second chance and that all people can be more giving no matter how miserly they are. It can be 2 sentences, at least 2 sentences, but if you like to explain it a little more and potentially go into that top band, then that's where you probably make 3 or 4. 3 or 4 is the maximum. Like the point, don't spend too much time on it. But then again, don't just make rushed conclusions or say the same thing. It shows you have a limited understanding of the text. You must try and think about some elements of it, but you can't just spend the whole time on it either. So it's really important that you consider it, but just don't rush it. So essentially, that's the piece of paragraph. Point, evidence, technique, explain, and reader. That's essentially all it is. And there's one more bonus part that you really need to put at the start. The intro. It's especially important if you have a bunch of texts to compare in English literature paper too, because you either have worlds and lives, love and relationships, power and conflict, or like the AQA anthology or whatever. Essentially speaking, you will have to compare 2 poems. One of them will be mentioned, but you have to choose the other one. So it's even more important you put an intro for those. So you just give a brief summary of both poems, and then you see how different they are and how similar they are in that intro. And like I said, for the explain, this is important so that when you're explaining something, don't go off the tangent. If you need to think of something, you just look at the intro and then look at the quote, then you know what you're talking about, rather than diverging and just essentially being stranded from your point or your evidence. So the intro is, again, really, really important thing to have. And having an intro sometimes isn't necessarily needed, but if you do have like a guide for yourself in the exams or assessments or whatever, then you will definitely not go off tangent. You're more likely to stay on your point, and therefore that gives you more marks since you're not going off topic. So I hope that this video benefited you. Be bright, stay right, have a good day, and ensure you like, comment and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video.